No, absolutely. Do I recommend it? Probably not. You've got to basically assess how fast, how quick, and how often you're going to be looking at certain time frames so you can keep up with any changes in the last major move. Okay, so if you're learning Fibonacci, longer time frames are probably going to be easier because you're still working your way around how to put this study on your chart, and that takes time. Time is not a luxury that you have on short-term time frames. So keep that in mind. That's for any analysis. This is not simply for the Fibonacci. This is for any analysis, chart pattern analysis, whatever. You know, the newer you are at it, the more difficult it's going to be to apply it to a short-term time frame because there's just more data that you're going to have to contend with. It's just more things that are changing and fluctuating on that short-term time frame. Okay. As far as the 34 EMA wave, absolutely. 34 is a Fibonacci number, and that's part of the process that I was going through testing the validity of Fibonacci-based moving averages. That's absolutely correct. Okay. All right, so let's go ahead and take a peek at another time frame on this dollar-yen. Let's jump over to the 15-minute chart. Actually, let's get rid of this old Fibonacci here, or this longer term. Let's look at the 15-minute chart. So do I have a low here? Yes. Are there going to be times that I'm going to tell you that there's not a valid Fibonacci level on a chart? I don't think there's always a valid Fibonacci level on a chart. Sometimes I'll go ahead and use pivot points when there's not a clean last major move. Clean is just another way of saying that it's unretraced. I want to see a lot of zigzagging within my Fibonacci retracements. Like, see all the zigzagging in here? Could I draw a Fibonacci from here to here? Sure. But when I get all this zigzagging, I'm not really crazy about the validity of this retracement. Okay. So there will be times when you say, you know what, this is not a clean last major move. Lots of little retracements in here. The smaller your Fibonacci retracement typically is, the less valid it will be. So you do want to look for that last major move, that most recent significant rally or sell-off. I don't want you really necessarily dealing with these smaller moves. By the way, is there a limit to how many candles? Yeah, I usually have a criteria of at least 3 candles that will qualify as a last major move, because you don't want to necessarily be pulling Fibonacci's on spikes and so forth. So to me, at least 3 candles. Okay. All right, so when we're looking at Fibonacci, what are other things we can overlap with those projected support or resistance levels to help us fine-tune or focus in on the most likely of the decision levels? When I have a Fibonacci level that's overlapping with my wave, when I have a Fibonacci level that's overlapping with a psychological level, or previous support and resistance, a chart pattern level, when it's overlapping with something else, 200-period simple moving average, 50-period simple moving average, it helps confirm the significance of that level. Okay? Oop, that's not what I wanted to do. Hang on for 1 second. There we go. It helps confirm the significance of that level for me. So a lot of times, pivot points aren't my favorite tool, but there's a certain amount of beauty in their simplicity and their lack of subjectivity. They're pretty objective. The most subjective element of a pivot point is when you determine the high-low close. Obviously, in a 24-hour environment, when do you basically impose upon the market the close? I use, for my pivots, a 2 a.m. Eastern to 11 a.m. Eastern open and close. So basically, I'm kind of overlapping. You can even go out to noon. I'm basically overlapping with the Frankfurt Open, the London close. So about 2 to noon Eastern Standard Time, 2 a.m. to noon basically lunchtime. So when there's not a good, clean last major move, and I'm looking for support and resistance outside of chart patterns and trend lines and psychological levels, I could pull up a pivot. So pivots are my an alternative to Fibonacci, but my preference is for the Fibonacci. Okay. So let me just pull a Fibo here, my backup. Bear with me here. You know, one of the problems, let me just tell you, Phil, one of my problems with the Fibonacci that I'm looking at on that April to July 15, and I see exactly what move you're talking about. There were some smaller moves in between, especially that junk we saw between mid-May to that low in July, that really kind of turns me off of pulling a Fibo there. Okay, I will tell you that right off the bat. So that slop we saw kind of turns me off. But I will say that right now it looks like we are battling with the 382. So just as you said, but I'm just not, you know, I see some activity at the 23.6. I'm just not crazy about the price action, like I said, between mid-May and mid-July.